Hello everybody, Adrian Plass here.
Yes, and Bridget. Hello.
So, anything from our friends out there?
Well, it's
this week?
176.
Oh, right. Sounding the Shallows, 176. Yeah.
Sounding the Shallows, 176. And he points out, and I'm not so bothered about the number as what it actually says in the verse, but he points out that in Psalm 119,
which is
the
119
longest psalm
Yeah.
in the Bible, there are 176 verses. That's long. I wouldn't want to have that one on a matins service in church, seeing you're going to do the whole psalm.
You'd have some mad people in the pews, wouldn't you? Or whatever they said.
But the verse is, I have strayed like a lost sheep. Seek your servant, for I have not forgotten your commands. So actually that's pretty nice verse, actually. Well, it is, you know.
Well, I've been busy this week writing a limerick about Elijah.
Well, of course, when we last spoke to you, we were doing a week based on Elijah, weren't we, called Crossing the Chasm of Inadequacy. We were away, sitting in our room, recording it. And yes, come on.
The problem with the problem with this, I mean, the problem with limericks is they're really difficult to get right because the meter has to be precise and the rhyming has to be precise. And the rhyming in this case, for those who perhaps are not as familiar with the English language, is that it's a sort of distortion of the English language. Nevertheless,
do you mean you cheated, Adrian?
Sort of. I mean, there's cheating and cheating, right? Anyway, this is it. Okay, see what you think. When God takes the reins, said Elijah, a miracle rises inside you, but courage decays on those Jezebel days when you find he's no longer beside you. Do you know how long it took me to write that?
I can guess. No, but wasn't that a lovely week that we had with people? And then we spent a weekend at Scargill House with another group of people doing another,
we were at
exploring
Thornley
another
Hotel,
theme.
weren't we?
Yes.
Granger of Sands.
Yeah. And it was very cosy on both occasions, really. It really made me think about these particular months. And then I was thinking, I mean, I don't know if you call that poetry, but, you know, in the UK...
I call it a limerick.
We have some great famous poets. And I was thinking of the contrast between two of them. There was John Keats, and he talks about seasons of mist and mellow fruitfulness, doesn't he?
Yeah, he does.
Autumn.
Yes.
And then there's Ted Hughes, and we are just about to come into November, and he calls it the month of the drowned dog. And it has been raining pretty totally and completely. But they're strange times, aren't they, these months? The darkness coming into the evenings. They are
very well. They are for me certainly. It's such a deep feeling in me. I can hardly express it, although I have written about it. I might be something you can read later on about it, but it's because it is such a mixture of melancholy and elation because of the changes, the death of things, the knowledge that things will live again, and nostalgia seems to become a very easy thing to get into. Some know something better than nostalgia, memory, recollection of times, people, places that are in the past.
And then on a practical level, you've got the fact that everything's a little bit more difficult. And people who are on their own or people who are living in difficult situations, everything's magnified a bit because of the season, because of the sadness it might bring, because of memories, as you say, that are not necessarily positive. And one of the things I really thought this week and a half really being with people was how important being with people is, really.
Yeah. For most of us, yeah.
Well, for many of us. No, it's nice to be on your own for a little while, but coming away from a difficult situation or just eating with people because you eat every meal on your own.
No, there were one or two people who we met last week who, one of the things, people who've been widowed or lost wives or husbands, is the loss of someone to come home to.
Yeah.
It's a big, big thing.
I think that one of the problems with that as well is you begin to think, is it just me that's feeling like this? And I was remembering, and I hunted it out, there was, I think it's a poem. I've worried. It's definitely not a limerick, but it's not a beautiful.
Rhyme.
They do.
Yeah, that doesn't qualify as
okay, but it was a poem called "Am I the Only One?" Looking back, there were one or two, that maybe you were the only one. I mean, I particularly liked the hoovering. Well, I mean, am I the only one who likes Norman Wisdom films? Bat Out of Hell, Little House on the Prairie, and Silence of the Lambs, and then you put probably. And
I think I am probably the only one.
But what about this one?
Oh yeah, shall I read that one?
Yeah,
then?
go on.
Am I the only one who checks his carpet for big bits before hoovering it, then afterwards finds the suction pipe blocked with dead dogs, half bricks, rolls of prairie wire, nests of tiddlywinks, most of the Sunday Times, and £6.50 in small change? I doubt it. I might have exaggerated that.
I think you probably have. But what about this one then? Come on, one more.
Which one?
Well, the next one
will do. All right. Am I the only one who talks loudly to himself when he's alone, then suddenly realises he isn't, feels like a loony, and tries to make it sound like a song? I mean, everybody must have done that. You're walking around a corner and you're going, blathering on, and someone suddenly appears and coming around the corner the other way, and you start going,
Actually, Adrian, I'd like you to carry on really for the next two, because I would be most interested to know whether people do think you're the only one.
Well, I might be.
Try this one.
All right. I can't remember most of these.
No.
Am I the only one who hates all criticism, especially the constructive sort? Because that usually means I have to do something about it. I hope not.
And this one, Adrian?
Yes. Am I the only one who likes to have his cake, eat it, sick it up, then feel sorry for himself? Possibly. There was a bit of a more meaningful one on the end.
Well, I'm just coming to that because I think the whole point is that we may feel we're the only one who does silly things, or the only one who can't cope with criticism, or the only one who... But the last verse of this is really important. Am I the only one who loves and needs love, and fails and falls and cries, then takes the hand of anyone whose turn it is to be strong, whose turn it is to be Jesus for me? I don't think so. And that, I think, is the root of why, especially at this time of the year, if we are struggling with loneliness or feeling we are the only one, this weekend there were people who were going through really quite difficult things, but they could relax because they were in company of people who were not perfect, or were not being successful, or did not have perfect families, or were happily married, and all the list of things that can isolate you and make you feel alone.
Yeah.
And they don't need to talk about it all the time. They're just there.
It's really important, and one of the important things I think about Scargill House, and I'm sure some other Christian places are like this, is that there is no fixed way of being a Christian there. It's often said, it's a place where you're a place in which you're safe to say dangerous things. I mean, so that you can actually express where you are and what's hurting you or what's looking weird about faith or whatever, without someone landing on top of you with the weight of orthodoxy. Because one of the things undoubtedly we know so many people need is to be heard, not and to not be alone with that. Because you have to work through that, and it's really hard sometimes to work through it on your own. Yeah,
and I mean, that being actually physically with people is obviously best. And I know that many churches, I'm sure all over the world, are working on the fact that people need not just safe places, but they need warm places. And I don't just mean, although actually I do to some extent mean, because heating has got so expensive, warm places where you can go and be physically warm. But I'm in places where you are accepted, cafes maybe, meeting rooms where you can just go and, for a little while at least, not be alone, and not be judged if you're not getting it 100% right. But I was thinking, Adrian, is it possible? I mean, during COVID, it all had to be sort of virtual.
Well,
Have we learnt from it? I mean, can email create that same sense of being heard?
Well, email is a particularly interesting one because there's no doubt that email can be freezing cold and very warm. And one of the odd things about email is that if you introduce into your, I mean, it's only my experience, but if you introduce into your email a little pool of warmth at some point, it can change the whole tone of it. And I love it when people write to me and add something that isn't anything to do with why they've written, but is something for me. I mean, in the old days, we used to laugh about people sending out appeals for money and putting a little bit in biro at the bottom,
yes,
so that people would think, oh, this is especially... But I do like it when that happens. But they can also be very cold emails because people think to themselves, well, I don't need to go into depth about this. All I'm doing is saying this, this very simple thing.
Yes, and don't you think that rather like, I mean, when children learnt to write, they would then learn to develop their writing. They'd then be able to write a story. And the art of letter writing was something where you tried to really communicate. There's very famous letters where people have explored things in a very particular way to someone and developed a friendship through that. I mean, C.S. Lewis was past master. Well, isn't that right, that he answered everything that he was sent?
I don't know the absolute truth of that, but everything I've written suggests that he spent a great deal of time replying to letters. And of course, he didn't have the benefit of cut and paste in those days.
No.
So nowadays you could take a good thing to say. You can think, oh well, that'd be good to put that or say that. So you can slip it in. Yeah. But I think Lewis's comment, which just quickly, which we've often made about originality coming from truth, is that if you express where you are and how you feel, it's always going to be original and fresh and true. But whereas if you simply take something from somewhere else, it's not going to work as well.
I think the danger has been that email was seen as a shortcut, and it is in business, isn't it? And the emojis, which we've talked about before, if used right, they help. They just, whether it's texting, whether it's... Now, texting is another modern way of communication that I've actually found really helpful. I remember before our kids in their teens were going into an exam and they had their phones, I would just say, thinking of you. Yeah. We can do that, can't we? People going into hospital, not just praying for you, but thinking of you, being in it with you, being for those few moments.
Certainly from people who care about you or love you. To have a few words of encouragement is excellent.
Well, and maybe be braver to do it for people who you don't know very well. So long as it's real and not just, oh, that so-and-so always does that. As long as it's real.
Well, I have this new plan for when people say you haven't written. And usually you say, well, I've been very busy, or I've had a little, not all that, a bit under the weather.
Yes.
I thought I might invent ridiculous things to excuse my lack.
Have you been thinking about any then?
Well, one of the old ones that I always enjoyed was that I have been very busy transporting an elephant to my aunt in Clitheroe.
Okay, well, I mean, you did that once. No, yes, of course.
It takes time. No, I was ridiculous. But if you put a little bit of you in the thing you're doing, your communication you're making, it does make a huge difference.
But that's difficult for some people, just as because you love words, it's difficult for some people. But there have been times I've been so touched. One of the things we were looking at with Elijah was the enormous value at one point in his life of a jar of water and a little cake.
That's right.
I mean, early in the story of Elijah, he's fed by the ravens. God tells him to hide. He's down. by the river. He's fed by the ravens. Nothing to think about. And then he goes through some wild miracles, but some desperate despair, and finally ends up saying, "I've had enough."
Yeah.
And it's a jar of water and a little cake. But I think if you said, "Oh, that's what you do," we'll send a jar of water and a little cake to everyone.
Yes.
It loses it. It's what will that person, what would that person really like?
I do remember when I was doing quite a lot of travelling and stuff, going to a house where I was staying and being shown, and you'll remember this. No, you weren't there, but I told you about it. Being shown into a dining room, and there was a chair there, and there was a place laid. And it was the husband actually who came in, and he put a bottle of wine next to my place, and he brought in an extraordinarily nice meal, and one or two other really lovely things, and just sort of said, "There you are," and went away again. Now, that might not suit some people, but for me, as I think he knew, it was somewhere close to heaven. Rather like the man in Elijah who did that. But when you're tired and you've been talking about God and you wish there wasn't a God, because then you wouldn't have to talk about him. No, I think so. Well, you know what I mean. So you arrived there, and he's thought about it, and he's thought this person could do with a little treat.
But
because he'll be off again.
I
the
mean,
next day,
just as the jar of water and the little bit of bread, just as that. I mean, well, that sounds quite lavish. But going back to the simplicity of the thing that reminded him there was somebody that cared about him.
Yeah.
I mean, having been in two lovely places, but really quite different. Thornley is a hotel, that the food is amazing. Scargill is a community, and the food is really warm and cozy type of food. And for a lot of people who live on their own or coming out of difficult situations, or just want to be over a table with somebody, passing the marmalade, asking if you have coffee or tea, just being part of that warmth of sharing meals. It can be such a blessing.
Isn't it, when you do have somebody who you live with and you're with, it's hard to imagine not having that, not having someone to communicate with. Awful.
Well,
I mean
absolutely.
I
Absolutely. Or being in a situation where you can't communicate because things have broken down, and we need each other. I mean, we need each other. I mean, that's what that, am I the only one who loves and needs love and falls and fails and cries and takes the hand of anyone whose turn it is to be strong, whose turn it is to be Jesus for me. But autumn for you has always been not a dry time, but a special time, hasn't it?
It has, yeah. In the other poem, which is in that same book that you've got there, is called Autumn, and I actually wrote it and sent it to a friend, a very close friend from who I'd known since I was a teenager, I think, because there was something in me that worried in the autumn season.
But it was the equivalent
that
of
I
a
would,
letter, wasn't it?
It was lost, and so I wrote it and said, "This is what I wrote." Autumn is a fierce reply to those who still deny your brooding heart. This is speaking to God. Flaming death in fading sun, the yearly mulching of elation, sadness, pain. A branch unclothed, the tatters flying, rainbowed floating rain, tentatively lying, far more beautiful for dying. The final breath, softly whispering, enough. But still memories come down like leaves on old uneven pathways, such a sweetness. See, my breathing stands upon the air, and you, my oldest friend, are there. As evening falls, we pass between the tall park gates, a shortcut to the town. A shiver moves the children's swings. The earth is soft and dark and rich, an early Christmas cake. We know the grass will not be cut again, not this year. So, Down the tiled streets, the peopled rivulets, perhaps towards some tea, in places that were ours once, but now have changed, though early autumn darkness stares just as hungrily through plate glass windows, velveted by bright electric embers. We are so glad to be there, pouring tea, pleased that we are laughing once again, relieved that we are us once more. I have been troubled by a fear that everything is gone, the fingertips of friendship cold and numb. But autumn is a season that returns, with intimations of the death of pain, and so, my friend, shall we. Spirit, you have brooded well, melancholy autumn beauty, and the spring to come. Be worthwhile, wouldn't it, thinking about someone who could do with a contact, do with a bit of communication.
Yeah, or as in your case, a friend who, because you'd moved and because life had gone on, you feared you'd lost.
Yeah.
Just making that contact. And we do have email, we do have text, we do have letters, we do have cards. We have so many ways of just opening up the possibility that you'll have tea again, even if it's only over the phone.
Virtual tea.
Virtual tea, yeah.
Have a go. Think about it.
Yes.
Could do someone an awful lot of good. We'll see you next week.